everybody. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
I'm Camilla Clyghorn.
I'm Z Garcia.
Speaking of Z, we have a game today called Ancient Knowledge. The knowledge is you.
Not the
is you.
ancient.
I can live with that.
Okay.
All right, this is...
I'm this hexagon on the side that says yellow.
No, she's yellow, you're the hexagon.
Oh,
All
okay.
right. None of this is making any sense. We're talking about... This game is coming from Yellow later this year. And we played it live here on the channel, we have a recorded play of it on the channel that you can check out. This is a civilization building game where your civilization is going to wax and wane, and you're going to gain and lose knowledge. I'm making it sound very thematic here.
You're putting a lot of work into the theme
It's a card
here.
game with a civilization theme.
All right. Well, will you like it? Let's find out how it plays. Here we go.
Here we're taking a look at one player's board. Every player will have one just like it, and somebody will be the start player. The game is going to be over when one player has 14 cards in the past over here. And at that point, we are going to finish out the round and figure out the scores. You are going to get victory points for all the cards in the past. This number right here, so 1 point for that one, 2 points for that one. You are going to lose points for lost knowledge that has accumulated in this area, and you'll also get 1 point for every card up here. There's also some cards that will have endgame scoring in their writing over here in the past. Whoever has the most points is going to be the winner of the game. So a turn overview looks like this. You're going to have an action phase where you take 2 actions. Then we'll do the timeline phase where any of these recurring abilities will take place. After that, we go to the decline phase in which any cards that are played up here are going to shift down. And if they shift down from the 1, they fall off and go to the past. And if they had any of these knowledge tokens on them, that becomes not lost knowledge over here in this area. And then lastly, we check if the game is over. And again, that's 14 or more cards here in the past. And if that's the case, we finish out the round. So the actions are over on this side. And so let's take a look at the things you can do. You can create, which is play 1 card. If you play an artifact card, you are going to put that in one of these artifact locations down here. You can have at most 5, and you cannot willingly discard them, though sometimes they will discard themselves. You can also play one of these cards, and they come in 3 different types, and you would play that above the line here, the timeline, in the matching location, though you can pay to move this around, make it happen later or earlier if you so choose. When the cards come into play, they might do something immediately, they might do something when they fall to the past, which is what that symbol is, plus they come into play with some amount of knowledge that ideally you will be removing as it moves down, and so that when it falls into the past, there is no lost knowledge there. You can learn, which is taking a technology. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. You can archive, which is discard one of those knowledge tokens from any one of your monuments for each card you discard from your hand. So I could discard 3 cards from my hand, remove 3 of those knowledge tokens from a card in my timeline. You can excavate, which is draw 2 builder cards for each card in your past. What that implies is I can take these that have fallen to my past, I can rotate as many as I want to, say I could do all 3 of these, and then that would let me draw from the deck of cards, which is very large, 6 cards, 2 for each of those. And then lastly, I can search, not an ideal action, but sometimes you'll find yourself doing it, and that is simply drawing 1 card from the deck. That is what you are doing. Of course, a large part of the game comes in with the combinations of abilities that you'll find on these cards, and the various things they'll let you do, as well as your artifacts and the ways they'll let you bend and break the rules. This is the technology area, and whenever you take the learn action, you are going to take one of these technologies and utilize that. Some of them will have a requirement, such as this one here. Some of them will not, such as this one here. If you do it, you have to make sure you qualify, such as having 3 artifacts on your board. If you do, then I could take this card. And then I'll do the ability, in this case, instantaneously. Draw 3 cards. I will draw 3 cards from the main deck, and I will place that right there. Now, these are not immediately replenished. Only when one of these lines is down to a single card will that be discarded and the cards on it replenished back up to 3. And you will see the different types that you will find here can line up with your board. That might have to do with some bonuses later on in the game. You have a level 2 down here, which are all victory points at the end of the game, which is what this entails. And then in-game actions. Once a player has 7 or more cards in their past, then one of these rows is also going to become a level 2. And then we're down to a single line with level 1s, 2 with level 2s, so that you can get more victory points closer to the end of the game. And you would, of course, replenish that line the same way. Once you're down to a single card, discard that card and replenish the line back up to 3. So to wrap this up, let's go ahead and take a quick look at an example turn. It is my turn here. I'm going to go through my phases. First, the action phase. I am going to take 2 actions. We'll flip over for that. My first one is going to be excavate. I'm going to flip both of these sideways, and I'm going to draw 4 cards from the deck. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now for my second action, I'm going to create. And I am going to play this card here. You'll notice some cards have a cost next to their symbol at the top. That requires me to discard other cards from my hand, in this case 2. So I'll go ahead and discard 2 cards, and this is going to go in the correct position over here. You can also, by the way, if there already was a card here in position number 2, you can stack above it, but at most 2. And now these cards are adjacent for anything that cares about that, and these are adjacent. These 2 here are not adjacent, all right? So that was my 2 actions. Now, let's go ahead and flip back to the player aid. Check out the timeline phase. Now I'll activate anything that has that symbol there in whatever order I want to. So we're going to take a look. This one over here only happens when it falls off. This one over here says, if this monument is adjacent to at least 2 of those, I discard 3 from this monument. That is not the case. And make sure you don't forget, which I just did, to put the knowledge on that new one that you put into play. So this should get 2 on there, so that, you need to take that off before it falls off. So this one's not going to happen. This one over here says, if you have at least 3 of those in your timeline, discard 1 from any one of your monuments and draw 1 card. Very well. I'm going to discard this one from that monument, and I am going to draw a card. I am going to do this one if I have at least 3 of these artifacts in my board. On my board, I draw a card. And then this, if I have at least 17 lost knowledge, I can then learn technology without fulfilling its... If I fulfill a reputation, I can do that for free. So I am not going to do that one. I can't do that one. Now we go to the next step, the decline step, where everything shifts over 1. This one falls off. If that knowledge was still on it, it would have come over here, but it does not. And so I am going to place that there ready so I can use it to draw cards later on. And then we check if it's the end of the game. No one has 14 cards here yet. I have 4. And so we are done. If I was at 7, you want to make sure that you go over to the technology area and you flip over one of these from the 1 side to the 2 side. Now it's the next player's go. So there you go. That is how the game works. Let's go ahead and go back up top.
Okay, so we mentioned this, at the beginning a little bit as a joke, but it really is true, that the game is not particularly thematic.
Sure.
Right,
And,
no.
I mean, I give them the credit. They put every card is a different artifact, a different ziggurat that they found and these things. But the cards, the way they did the artwork and everything, I just look at the card and I see a color, green and the stuff that's on it.
I feel like I feel like the mechanisms fit the theme well. I think Chris, you had said this before, where as they age down, it makes sense in the theme. But it could have been anything else as well. So I think the theme is well done in this, but also once you get playing, not really there.
I like the artwork, which, again,
Very much so.
a big part of sometimes card games themes is card games art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a lot of what that ends up being the theme that you can take from something like this. And I think it looks good. So the art fills that in for me. I'm like, ooh, I built a thing. Oh, it's decaying. Oh, it's ancient. Whatever.
I like the idea that you're rescuing the knowledge, the little tablets on there. So the little bit of theme that I feel like there is, it's negative victory points when they fall off and there's still knowledge on there. But there's that little bit of Alexandria burned down again. Darn it. And so I like this idea of rescuing knowledge from getting lost into obscurity.
Right.
But that inevitably things do fall off the edge of your board. And I don't know, civilizations do. They just rise and fall, and that's how it is. So I think well implemented.
The components are fine. I like the little tablets. I think the iconography is pretty easy. You don't sit there and have to figure out what things mean or understand. There's a little bit of oddities where there's an endgame scoring means endgame points. They use the same
I don't
symbol.
like that. I was about to mention that most of the symbols are good. During your turn things, the cyclical things, the falling off the edge symbol. I like all of those. But you're right. The end game scoring symbol is the symbol for victory point. So it'll be like victory point, arrow, 3 victory points. I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
it needs to be a symbol that means end game scoring. That was a weird one.
I guess maybe I didn't have that because I thought that's what that symbol was. But the confusion is it's the same. So that symbol for endgame scoring is the same as the points.
Right.
is what
Whenever
you're
I teach
saying.
the game, I
And
always tell
guess-
people that looks weird, but what that just means is you're getting 5 points at the end of the game, and it's not hard to understand.
I guess
once
you
go through
explained it, I was like, I never thought again about it.
I kept
but
thinking about it and thinking
the
about
entire
it.
time, all night, kept you up.
Yeah. He called me in the middle of the night. Chris, why? Is every point 3 points? Nosy. It's okay.
But every card in the deck is different, and that's kind of a neat aspect to the game. And the main mechanism of the game is those cards sliding at the top, and it's a pretty fascinating one. I don't think I've seen a game quite like this where you're almost going into debt. You take a card. The cards are free from your hand for the most part. A couple of them cost cards, but mostly they're free to play. But then you put tokens on it, so it starts at negative points, and you're trying to clear up that knowledge and make it better.
I do like that. It's the feeling of aging, right, that works, and you know that every card has a lifespan, but it does it cleanly. It's not about, like, put another aging token on all of your cards. How did I do that yet? You just slide everything over, you're set. You know that that's going to be it. Did anything fall off? Take those negative points, trigger an effect maybe, and when you have one of those cards that you're waiting for that effect for when it falls off, it feels so stinking good. Like, yes, it's finally the time for that. But a lot of the other cards will have effects at the end of every one of your turns when it's sitting out there. So it has this like engine building feel, but you also know that part of your engine is going to go away at some point.
It reminds me of a little bit of like the old school 51st State, like when that game first came out. And in some ways it's a little similar. It's a game driven by cards with abilities. In the original printing of 51st State, every card you put out could do something 3 times, and then it would break down. And then you had to play a new card that you would replace that one with. This game has that built into it. Every card does something, and it decays and goes away, like you're saying. And I like that feeling. It's an interesting meeting point between strategy and a very tactical play sense. You know, this idea of like, ooh, this card is going to move from 5 to 4, and I'm holding one that comes in at 3 and wants to be neighbors with that. I'm going to hold on to that for 1 round. It's going to slide, bam, I got you. Now they're going to be neighbors for a little bit. You know, I really like that. So that's very tactical to me, and I really enjoy tactical card games like this. Then you've got the artifacts. I think that's what they're called, the purple ones at the bottom. And they give you that little bit of that long-term feel where you get to, I don't know, give yourself abilities that you can rely on. You don't have space for that many, but they're there. You can count on some things. I really like that mix.
I really like you talked about the artifacts. I think that's one of my favorite parts of the game. Is in a way you're kind of building your own asymmetry, which will then score into or feed off the engine that you're building up top. You know, and I really like that you have a set number of artifacts that you can have. You can only ever have, I think it's 5 for the entire game. So, you know, are you going to try to get them out early so that you can use those powers, or wait a little bit because you have a card that is the effect you benefit from not having them out, something like that, depending on how you're kind of building your own asymmetry. I like that, and I think it's something static because there's a lot that you can do and control and manipulate in this game. But I like that it has that one part of the board that's static to kind of give you that jump start on the strategy, if you will. You get that artifact, okay, cool, I think I can play this, I can afford it, I'm going to build a strategy around this, and I know this will be here the whole game.
Right.
And I also really like that the artifacts are not worth points. I really like that.
That's true.
Because they are really cool abilities. When you get one, it's obvious to play it, sort of. Except you really need to get those cards start moving on the top.
Yeah.
Because I've seen games where people are building on, I got 5 artifacts, and how many monuments have fallen into decay? Oh, 1. How about you? I'm at 7. I'm like, maybe I better catch up. And I enjoy that because it gives that. Just like I enjoy, as a side note, that they give you starting hands for your first playthrough, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes teaching the game easy. You can even stagger the game a bit by saying, Chris, you're a newbie. Here, have the starting hand, and I'll draw 10 and take 6. Because probably the starting hand, I shouldn't say probably, that I've seen the hands, they're very nicely synchronized.
They're balanced.
They're meant to help you.
Every one of them, I believe, has an artifact so that no one starts the game and is like, I wish I had one of the purple cards.
Right.
I like that. I think it's a good touch. Man, when you say you develop your own asymmetry, that's a feeling that I love in games. Is the card play is cool. The card play is very fun, tactical, comboing things together. But when you can kind of create your own asymmetry that lasts in a game, that just gives me it gives me a direction to go in. And so I'm thinking, yes, now I really want equal number of the 3 different types of things because I really benefit from that. Or I want to have different color things perpetually in play because I'm going to be harvesting knowledge off of that for free extra every round. That's awesome. That's a great feeling.
So I have 3 minor annoyances about the game. I really like the game, but one of them is the technology cards. I think they're cool in the middle of the table, and I like how they are, but with I feel the least theme from them, unfortunately. I wish it was like, that's the telephone or that, whatever. There's nothing, right? They're just cards. But there's only a very few of them. They're tiny decks of cards. I wish they were thicker decks. And I like taking them, but I wish that part was a little stronger. It feels slightly weak compared to the cards on top.
It's also not super connected. There's some connection with some of the cards you have, but not that many of the cards in the main deck, I feel, reference that or connect to it. Like if you've taken this is suddenly something you can do. No powers turn on because you've taken them, They also don't cycle very well, and this is a complaint you had, where in a 2-player game, it might stagnate a little bit because you take one of each line of 3. You can take one, but the other 2 stay. Then you can take another one, and then you cycle them. They might sit there for a bit. No one's taken. One line might end up not being plundered.
Another thing I have is that the game has not a lot. I don't remember how many cards this game has. 148 cards. Like 11 of them or so are attack other player cards. And I just don't like them. I get they added them in the game for some back and forth
player interaction,
but I just don't get me wrong. If I'm attacking you, I'll burn your villages down. In a game that's about that, this game, it feels slightly out of place.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think my play style, I don't really play into that, so I use those kind of as what I call like my burner cards, because there's certain cards that you have to discard a card in order to be able to play, and it's like I get one of those, and it's like, all right, right to the back. But I would read them when I was like, if somebody played that on my engine that I built here, I would be really upset, because one of my complaints with this game is it can kind of slow down or slog down on each player's turn, because there's a lot going on that they have to kind of combo through and think about, and so sometimes it just feels a little like sloggy, for lack of a better word, where it just bogs down. I think if you try and mitigate that or combat that by having a plan out beforehand and planning out your turns and your card order and that kind of stuff, but then somebody comes in and wrecks something, it's like, okay, hold on, from the top. So not only does it feel misplaced in all the other mechanisms that are happening in here, I think it leads to what I think is a problem with the game and just kind of being a slog at those higher player counts.
And it folds right into that problem by being a targeted card, or those 11 or 13 or whatever, where with 4 players, I don't want to target any one player because I'm inadvertently helping the other 2 I'm not targeting. If I pull you back, that just helps those other 2. You know, if I give you -4 points, it's not the same in a 4-player game as giving me 4 points.
Sure.
You know, in a 2-player game, I don't have a problem with the take that card. To be fair, I don't really play them either because they don't seem that good. But I don't have a problem with it. And 2, me hurting you is the same as me helping me.
No, I agree. That's how I feel
Yeah.
about a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I will say they felt worse reading them than they did in practice.
I absolutely agree with that, because my first thought was like, ooh, I'm liking what's going on here. You're teaching it to us. Ooh, having fun playing. And then I drew into a few of those, and I thought, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. And kind of what you said, like, I think what you said, it's easy to spend cards in this game, because you have to spend cards for other cards. If I don't really like this, and I also find that they're not that great, they're not that very many victory points for me to, like, slightly claw at you a bit, I'm going to play something that's more fun, that's more enjoyable. You could take them out. There's so few of them in the deck. I thought it was going to be a bigger issue for me than it was.
No, I agree. That's why I call it a minor problem. And then the biggest problem I have with the game is I think it's too long and sloggy at 4. 2 is great. 3 works fine. 4, it can go a little slow, especially with there's this one card and one technology that have the same ability, which is like draw the top 8 cards and pick one. And you're like, oh, my word, we're just stopping the game for a while here.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of it's fun when you're the person who draws that. When you're someone else like, I got to read 8 cards. That's a lot.
And think about which ones I already have in hand also. Yeah.
Right.
And in a 2-player game, again, not as big of an issue. In a 4-player game, it kind of slugs that. I don't know that I would often want to play this with 4. Just because it is... I don't think
What are
it's
you
bad.
gaining? What are you gaining at 4 players?
Friends,
No, I disagree.
colleagues.
I will use every one of those targeted cards to try to make one player quit so that I can bring it down to 3 players.
New strategies and games.
I don't disagree, though. I'm sorry.
No, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, like, if I had the opportunity to play this with 4 people, like, new to the game, I would teach it and let them play, because their experience at 3 will be noticeably better than at 4.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
This is a
Absolutely.
great. I think it really sings at 2. 3's fine, it's a little longer, but you're really not gaining anything. Is my point.
I think my problem with it too, though, is, and you mentioned this when we were talking about the cards up top. I forget what they're called. But they don't refresh as much. And so it can just get stuck there and stagnant. And if you have something, for example, in one of the plays I had was at 2, and I had a card that scored based on sets of getting those. And we went like, I don't know, 4 or 5 rounds before that resetting. I didn't ever see a type of one of the cards. I had 2 or 3 of each of the other types, but one of the types I had none of, and I couldn't get it. And there's no way to refresh that unless the other person buys one, or if you take one you don't need, or but you can't take it because you're not set up for that and you're nowhere near setting up for it. So I think at 2 there's just not enough refresh of that part right there, which can tie so heavily into some of the scoring that you've set up for.
What would you rate the game?
So I'm going to come in at a 7.5. This was really hard for me to rate because the mechanisms and what is going on, I really, really enjoyed. I enjoyed the synergies that you're finding with cards and trying to have, like I said, the stagnant part of your board, building that up to maximize that top part, of the aging and the scoring as it's going, and really maximizing those instant abilities versus long time abilities. It's just such a fun puzzle, and I loved that. But when I think about it, I can't come down on a player count that I would want to play it at. It's like at 4, I think it slogs too much. At 2, the part up top isn't refreshing enough. And so it's just one of those that I think, when I think about it, I want to play this game, I love what it's doing. Sure, let's aim for 3, and hopefully it's 3 perfect people. And so for me, it's a little, both sides, I guess every player count has a little bit of too many issues that I'd want to house rule something about it. And I feel like if I'm having to house rule, it does have to take a dog for that, because that just wait time is like, oh, is it my turn? No, not yet. Okay. Is it my turn yet? That gets old after about 10 minutes, but I'll give it 30 minutes. Oh wait, we're still only a quarter in the way of the game. Not a quarter, probably about halfway. But still, it's just, there's not a perfect player count for me. And so because of that, it takes a hit. But I like a lot of what it does, so a 7.5.
I like player counts 2 and 3 fine. I think they really sing and go well. And this game falls into the same category as Race for the Galaxy for me, even though I would be hesitant to say they feel spiritually
This is a Race for the
similar.
Galaxy killer.
No, I
Go ahead and say
no, because I'm giving this an 8. Race for the Galaxy is almost a 10 for me. It has some issues, but man, do I like putting those cards at the top, sliding them across, building a different strategy. Oh, I'm going to go for the negative knowledge. I call it the Loki strategy, getting, if negative points, but there are cards that said if you have 15 negative points, this card's worth 10. I'm like, ooh, now I'm only have 5 negative points. Still 5 negative points, but I can then not worry about those and do other actions. Or I could be the technology king, or what's wrong with being the technology king?
That's great. That's
It's a new
great.
storm opening, or the Blue Monument Man. Whatever it is, I have names for everything.
These are all alternate titles for this game.
Anyway, an 8, very solid game. I enjoy it.
I'm going to come in a little bit higher than that. I really, really like it. I'm going to give it an 8.5, and I could even see it going higher than that with time. Everything about this game, all the parts, is stuff I enjoy. I love games that feel like a nice marriage between tactics and strategy. This game gives me that. It's a great meeting point between those two feelings. I love cards with powers. I love that feeling of drawing a couple of cards and going, ooh, how do I fit this cog into this machine? I love mechanically that the machine has a very logical, clean way of breaking down. That's so good. That's the cleverest thing in here. Nothing about this do I look at and go, I don't like this part or whatever. I mean, maybe the take that cards a little bit, but they don't bother me. I think there is a perfect player count for me. That's 2. I think it's the back and forth is good. And then the take that cards aren't a problem anymore, really. So yeah, 8.5. I really, really like this game. I think it's excellent.
I'm giving this a 9. This really speaks to me. You talk about that big deck of cards, every one of them being unique, and some of them share a similar type of action or are very similar to each other. And yet, every time I draw a card, I'm like, ooh, that's exciting. Ooh, 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 not this game, but in a different setup, you would be excited.
I do think that occasionally.
Gosh, every card draw feels so good. Everything working together in a very simple rule book. Like, I was shocked, actually, reading through the rule book. I was like, oh, that's it? Like, okay, let's see what meat there is on the bones. A lot! Because those cards do so much. These ones want to be next to each other, so at the end of every round, they harvest knowledge off of each other. This one wants to be alone. This one wants to, this one works really well with my artifacts. This one is, I forget who mentioned that the cards never really timed the technology, but then the technology score based on the cards that you age out. So it's kind of that direction of relationship. Everything's so good in this, and it's so clean. You want to push your luck? There's a little bit of that in there. Can you completely harvest off this card before it falls off the edge? Oh, I didn't. I don't get those points. Every card is exciting to me.
I make a much more annoyed growl than that when that happens.
I'll do my Tom Vassell impression. Darn. That's how you said it.
Got it. Alrighty.
9, I love it.
So there you go, folks. That's Ancient Knowledge. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
I'm Camilla Cleghorn.
I'm Z Garcia.
We're going down in history.